Whole sports all plays. Yeah. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. Sport all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Whole sports all plays.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of ASAP Recap. I'm Aaman Patel. That is Dustin, stat guy. Dustin, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Aaman. I feel like I just talked to you not that long ago.
Oh man, that's crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. I know there's something. I just don't remember what it was. Well, we do have a bunch to go ahead and get into. And something we didn't talk about recently is the USFL. The USFL is back. It made its brief appearance back in the 1980s, well before I was born. So I have no recollection of Donald Trump kind of turning that league into a disaster when he just suggested to move it into the fall to compete with the NFL. But I do know that the USFL had plenty of players and big-time players like Steve Young, Jim Kelly, who played in that league. So now we're back. We're here in 2022 in the USFL now, spring football, kind of almost as a breeding ground for the NFL. I believe they kind of said they were doing that and then positioned themselves against that point. They're kind of in that murky mix. But we've had a couple of games kick off. Dustin, I want to ask you because we've seen a lot of leagues come by. The AAF, the XFL try to come back. I think COVID really stumped them. But now the USFL is here. Do you think the USFL has a chance to stick around for more than half a year to a year?
I think it's going to last a year because once the XFL comes into the fold next year, that's going to be kind of the big question with the USFL. Mm-hmm. From a product side of things, because I think I watched 3 of the 4 games last week, and the only one I didn't watch was probably the best one of the weekend. But from a product side of things, it was better than what the AAF brought to the table when the AAF came into play, just because a lot of those players were college-level players who didn't get drafted and were just kind of linking on to the spring league, trying to showcase what they can do in the NFL versus the USFL has former NFL players on their roster. They have players who have played in the NFL and are just looking for that second chance. But the product was still not as good as what the XFL brought to the table in 2020. Mm-hmm. What the XFL brought to the table in 2020 is what everyone wanted to see in a spring league because you had college-level talent. And not only that, you had NFL talent in the XFL. You had Cordell Jones. You had P.J. Walker, Jordan Ta'amu, Josh Johnson, who is a 36-year-old, 14-year veteran in the NFL who seems like he's played with every NFL team by now. But Sammy Coates, who was a great receiver with the Pittsburgh Steelers for a couple of years. Like, the XFL had high-quality NFL-level players that, for whatever reason, weren't in the league anymore. And the USFL, I don't think is going to be able to get those type of players just because they don't pay a ton of money. I think each player gets $45,000 or $50,000 for the season. They don't market their product that well just because I don't know if it's because they don't have the money to do it. I don't know if it's just because it's a spring league and they're not going to market it the way they should. But with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson owning part of the XFL, he's going to market the hell out of that next year.
Yeah.
He's going to push every ounce of money he has into the marketing side of things for the XFL, so they're going to be able to brand their name better than the USFL. They're going to be the ones going after the high undrafted players that don't come out of college, people that could probably start that just won't. They're going to be the ones going after those practice squad players that just want to play instead of sitting on the practice squad. So they're going to put out the better product. Mm-hmm. They're going to compete with the USFL for a year, but I see the USFL making it for 2 years, obviously this year and then next year. But after that, I think it's just going to be the XFLs to run away with it for as long as The Rock wants to keep it going.
Yeah, I think the USFL, as you said, falls somewhere in between the AAF and the XFL in terms of the product on the field. For me, when I look at spring leagues, I think that it's not going to be as good as the NFL. That's just a given, right? The players are not going to be as good. And it might not even be good college football, to be quite honest, right? It's somewhere below that tier of football. So you have to find new gimmicks. You have to find new things that are going to attract people. When the XFL first came about, they had, a different way of choosing who's going to kick off, right? Whether it's just two guys running to a football, or they had different types of camera work where they had the sky cam, which the NFL uses on the kickoffs now. And we saw the USFL try to employ some of this stuff, right? Try to do something different with the drone footage and have a drone basically fly around for kickoffs. Everyone's mic'd up and you can hear them live during the game. Those kinds of things to me is what I'm looking for in the USFL. And that's how any spring league, to be honest, sticks. It's not going to be based off the quality of play, because the quality of play around everywhere, it's not going to be great, right? The XFL, as good as PJ Walker was, you could tell there was a big gap between PJ Walker and the rest of the league. And if you average it out, the football wasn't great. So they're not going to have great individual football, but it's going to come down to the marketing. The Rock has all that power, right? As you mentioned, it's going to come down to how far you push it and what kind of attractions you have. I think the XFL is going to have, again, the Rock's going to pour in a lot of it, and they're going to be willing to experiment a lot. The USFL, to keep up, they got to keep experimenting, keep trying new camera angles, keep trying new mics, keep trying this thing, that rule, this rule, just keep implementing different things, because that's how now SportsCenter is going to post about it. Now, okay, let me check out the Birmingham game. Oh, let me check out this game. Let me check out the Houston game. Let me check out these games. But you're not going to attract them just based off the football that you put on the field.
And the biggest issue that I have with the USFL, and I don't know why they decided to do this. I don't know if it was for financial reasons. I don't know if it was for travel. But they're putting all 8 teams in one stadium.
Yeah.
They're putting them at UAB Stadium at Legion Field. And if you look at the attendance over the week, and the first game was the New Jersey Generals and the Birmingham Stallions. Mm-hmm. Well, because Birmingham is the host city, I think they had like 30 or 35,000 people at that game, because Birmingham's the host city.
The Oakland A's will take 35,000
exactly.
people. You know what I mean?
When you look at the other 3 games combined, they said they had a total of like 9,000 people for the other 3 games combined, because it's Michigan, it's Houston, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. But all those teams are just living in Birmingham for the next 3 months, playing their games in Birmingham. So you're not going to get the fan following from those cities to drive to Birmingham just to watch a game. Yeah. Versus what the XFL did. Not only did the XFL put teams in non-football markets, but they also put them in football markets like Seattle, DC, Houston, Dallas, Tampa, and things like that. And for the most part, they put them in soccer stadiums. They put them in smaller venues, so even if you're getting 20,000 people, yes, 20,000 people is not ideal. They would want more than that. But if you're putting 20,000 people in a 25,000-seat stadium, it looks a lot better than putting 20,000 people in a 70,000 people stadium, just because you don't see all the empty seats. It looks like the games are sold out. It looks like people are having fun, so more people are going to be attracted to it. One thing I do want the XFL to do, which I think The Rock is going to do, just because he has a brain and knows what people want to see. But do you remember, how old are you right now? You're 21, right?
I'm 18.
18. Jesus, so you weren't even around.
I wasn't around for the first
No, you were around, but you were never playing this game. Do you remember the game ESPN NFL 2K5?
So I've heard of it. I don't remember playing the game.
So it was the game that Xbox brought in to compete with Madden.
Yes.
And they took a lot of what Madden games have now came from that game.
That's what I've heard. Yes.
There was a camera angle in NFL 2K where it was a helmet cam, where you would play with the quarterback and you would see like out of the quarterback's visor, and you could like look around, and then you would snap it, and as soon as the quarterback would throw it, the camera would switch to the wide receiver helmet cam, so you could watch the ball coming in to the helmet, catching it, and then you would get hit. XFL needs to come up something like that where every player has like a built-in helmet cam, so you can see what they're doing. Instead of this drone footage, which is fun because I like the drone footage, it got annoying because you could overhear the drone.
That's the issue with the drones, yeah.
So give him a helmet cam. Like if you want to be the quarterback's helmet cam when he's under center, zoom into that camera, see what the quarterback sees at the line, hear his play calls. If you want to switch over to the running back when the running back gets the handoff, switch over to the running back and do a helmet cam. I think that would keep fans a lot more engaged.
Yeah, again, like we said, it's going to be about your innovation. And I love that idea of the helmet cam. You know, again, how do you do it? Players who wear a visor, I'm sure you could find something to put in there. But and Nate is making a joke over here. Yes, Nate, there's someone younger. You're welcome. You're welcome for that one. But anyway, the innovation is what's going to set these leagues apart, right? And if you can find a way to bring in a helmet cam and give you different angles, I think that's what the XFL, I watched a documentary about it the first time they came. Again, you talk about the Skycam. That wasn't a thing in the NFL. No one knew what a Skycam was, but they tried it in the XFL, and it worked. So the USFL, the XFL, you got to keep innovating. And to your point about the stadiums, that's what I think makes the USFL feel so aloof to a lot of us. If we're not in Birmingham, we don't really know what's going on. I think when you have a startup league, I was a part of minor league cricket startup. There was 27 teams spread out across 26 cities. So there was a huge outreach. You had people from all over the country being able to latch onto something. Here it's, okay, if I live in Tampa, I have a team in the USFL, but I'm never going to go see them play. They're not here, right? That aloofness, I think, makes it really tough for people to connect to a new league. And maybe it's the financial thing, but if it was a financial thing, I would have waited a year, because you just don't throw something out there to throw something out there. You got to make sure everything's going to work. To me, the idea of soccer stadiums, baseball stadiums, whatever it is, try to fill up these stadiums that aren't football stadiums. It doesn't matter. Just get people in the hometown excited about watching the game, especially where you have established football audiences.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what the USFL needs to do. The XFL did a good job of doing it, and I am excited to see them return, because I thought they had a good thing going before COVID kind of shut them down. But if we transition into the NFL, which is the premier product, Deebo Samuel, I'm sure you all know by now, it's been the talk of the week in the NFL, has said, I want out of San Francisco. The report initially was that he wasn't going to get his contract, and then the report came out that he did. The San Francisco 49ers were willing to pay him, but Deebo did not want to be used like he was this past year. And to be honest, it's kind of a smart play from Deebo Samuel's perspective, because you're going to get beat up. Ezekiel Elliott, look at him. He got his big contract, boom, injured, and now talking about pay cuts. You're talking about not getting that second contract. So Deebo Samuel trying to preserve his shelf life. That's what he's doing by demanding this trade. Dustin, I want to ask you, where do you think he goes? Let's start with that. Where do you think Deebo Samuel ends up?
I originally thought he was going to end up in Kansas City, mainly because they got rid of Tyreek Hill, right, and then all the ammo they got from Miami for making that deal, they could just throw at San Francisco, and basically it'd be an eye for an eye. They gave up Hill, they got Deebo Samuel, they can pay him the same amount of money and just move on with things. According to reports this morning, they're not even listed as one of the top 3 teams to get him. And if you look at the top 3 teams that are on the list to get him, it's the Jets, Lions, and Packers. Those are the top 3 teams.
How are the Packers in there? I'm sorry.
Those are the top 3 teams that are linked to get him.
Right.
So from Deebo's side of things, obviously you would think he would choose Green Bay over those other 2 teams.
Right.
Because Green Bay's in a win now mode. They have Aaron Rodgers. They have at least some sort of a foundational base on their franchise where they're going to make the playoffs. And they lost Davante Adams, who was their number 1 receiver. The problem is, how is Green Bay going to afford him? Not only do they have to pay him most likely $20 to $25 million, which is kind of what Davante Adams wanted, which he didn't get in Green Bay. But what kind of ammo is Green Bay going to have to give up? They're going to have to give up the picks that they got from the Raiders. They're going to have to give up a lot of assets they may not want to give up. So does that make sense for them? Or is it more of we're in win now mode, we got to give Rodgers what we can give them to try to win? But seeing the Lions and the Jets kind of as those other 2 teams changes things a lot. That kind of puts us into perspective that is Deebo actually in it to win it? Right. Or is he actually in it for the money, knowing that these teams are not going to win right now, but they have the money where they can invest it and maybe win long term? You look at the Jets have, I think, the second most money to spend of anybody left right now.
Yep.
They have a young quarterback in Zach Wilson who looked the worst out of all the rookie quarterbacks last year, to be honest.
We know one thing, he can get down the field. That's the one thing. Out of all of them, he can get down the field.
Yeah, and outside of Zach Wilson, the Jets really don't have much on offense, so you bring in a guy like Deebo, well, that's going to be your primary offensive weapon. But what else do you have? You don't have anything else. I think Robert Saleh is going to be a good coach, but he's really got nothing to work with in New York. Detroit, to me, I think might be the favorite to get him at this point, just because record aside for Detroit last year, they were better than what their record showed.
100%. They were in a lot of games that they shouldn't have been in. Deebo knows week 1 against San Francisco. Yeah. He was there. He knows.
The first 7 or 8 games, Detroit probably should have been 3-5 or 4-4. Instead, they were 1-7 because they did not know how to finish a game. That all falls on Dan Campbell being a first-year head coach. But you have to give Detroit credit because they did battle in a lot of those games.
Yeah.
Detroit's got an established veteran quarterback in Jared Goff, who, although is not great, didn't have the best receiving core, didn't have the best offensive weapons to work with. So give him a guy like Deebo Samuel. You're kind of giving him that Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp type of player, which he had in the Rams. Mm-hmm. They have DeAndre Swift in the backfield, so they got a reliable running back. They have Quintez Cephas and Armand St. Brown at wide receiver, 2 other young wide receivers that the Lions can build off of. They have TJ Hawkinson, who's going to be a good tight end, and they have an improved offensive line that drafted Penny Sewell last year to protect Jared Goff. Detroit's going to be one of those teams that I think is a couple of years away yet, but they are putting some good pieces together in Detroit where if Deebo Samuel goes there, it does make a ton of sense for him because he's going to get paid, but it also makes a ton of sense for Detroit because that helps them get back to contention quicker.
Yeah, so Green Bay to me is out of the question just because I don't think San Francisco is going to give him to Green Bay because they know they're going to have to compete if they want to win the Super Bowl. So I do think it's Detroit or New York. And I like what you said about Detroit. Yeah, you got the young head coach. You got a quarterback that you don't really know of. Go get him a real number 1 wide receiver. Let Amon St. Brown keep learning. Let these young guys keep learning. DeAndre Swift in the backfield. And you can kind of balance things out. And, yeah, they were a lot better than what your record will tell you. To me, though, I brought it up to you yesterday. I think it's New York that gets them. And there's a couple of reasons. Number 1, they got 2 first-round picks, both within the top 10, I believe. It was 4 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So now you can couple up at least one of those. You're San Francisco. You're trying to get 1, if not 2 first-round picks for them. And there you go. If you're New York, you could give up 1 and still have 1 to go this year. Also, you have the young quarterback who his best receiver this past year was Corey Davis. And to be honest, Corey Davis did not look very good. He did not look like worth the money in which they paid him. So you go get him an actual number 1 receiver and let Corey Davis slide to it too, which should help him out. You also picked up Elijah Valley Tucker in the draft last year. Did they pick up Elijah Valley Tucker? No, I don't think it was them. I think that was the Chargers, excuse me. But you have Mekhi Becton, who, and then they had picked up another guard for the left side of the line. So you have the left side of your line is still intact. It's still very much there. So for me, it was Kelechi Osemele that they picked up. So you have both Mekhi Becton and Osemele there as your guard and tackle position. And then you have Zach Wilson as your quarterback. Now, I don't know what Zach Wilson is, but that's something that could work. Joe brought up the Minnesota Vikings. He basically said and I brought it up to Dustin the other day, it was basically 12 and Adam Thielen kind of for Deebo and how the money would work.
Yeah, you were saying like Corey Davis and Elijah Moore were the top 2 receivers with the Jets, right?
Yep. Yeah, Elijah Moore and Corey Davis.
Braxton Berrios is their number 3.
Braxton Berrios, yeah, and they have
you bring in Deebo. Well, now Deebo's your number 1. Corey Davis goes down to your number 2, which is the role that he thrived in when he was in Tennessee. Elijah Moore goes to your number 3, and we forget to mention that C.J. Uzomah signed with the Jets this offseason. Yes. So Zach Wilson actually got a much better receiving tight end to help him in those check down situations. So, yeah, him going to the Jets makes a ton of sense for New York especially.
Yeah, and one more thing is Robert Saleh was in San Francisco, and I know he was on the defense side of the ball, but there's still some of that connection that's got to be there. And could you imagine if you're New York, how much pressure this takes off of you in the draft? Because say you're left with 1 first-round pick, everyone would have been screaming for you to go take a receiver for Zach Wilson. Now you can sit back and whether it's Kyle Hamilton, whether that's Evan Neal, whether it's Jalen Johnson, whoever you want to take, you can go and take or Jermaine Johnson, excuse me, whoever you want to take, you can go take your guy and have a little bit of pressure off because you make the big splash. You're going to get fans back in the seats because Deebo's a fan favorite. To me, the New York makes most sense for San Francisco because they're going to want to get maximum value. I think they have the opportunity to offer that to them. And New York can also still hold on to a draft pick, get a lot better on the offensive side of the ball, and go and get a pass rusher if they want defensively, the safety that they want defensively, whoever they want on the defensive side. I think, to me, Deebo to New York makes the most sense out of the 3 teams. Minnesota, Joe brought up. I think Dustin was talking about
Joe actually might be onto something right now.
Oh, here we go. Joe, listen up.
So the Minnesota Vikings have now entered the Deebo Samuel sweepstakes and could be considered the sleeper in the sweepstakes. The 49ers drafted Samuel in 2019 as new Vikings general manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was in charge of getting Deebo to San Francisco. So he's got the connection with Kwesi. They both gotten along very well. Kwesi Adolfo has quietly gone behind the scenes to redo contract extensions and redo signing bonuses to free up $30 million in cap space.
The money's working. I remember Dustin yesterday talking about the money not working. Now, again, Joe's idea was you trade number 12 and you trade Adam Thielen. In return, you get Deebo Samuel. Dustin, as a Minnesota Vikings fan, would that excite you if that is the value that gets? Say you have to throw in a couple second rounders, however that works out. But it's 12 Adam Thielen and say 2 seconds.
I don't think they would even get rid of Adam Thielen, honestly.
Really?
I think they would keep Thielen and go Jefferson, Thielen, and Deebo if they bring in Deebo. Wow. I could see Alexander Madison being gone. I could see a couple defensive players being gone depending on who they are, and then obviously the pick situation. But if him and Adolfo-Mensah have that kind of relationship going back to 2019, you have to put Minnesota maybe as the favorite or at least one of the favorites at that point, because if they cleared up money, I don't know how much money they cleared up, but it says they went from like $7 million in cap space at the beginning of the offseason to now where they're sitting with $30 million. So obviously they freed up $20-some million to get to that point, which would be enough to bring in Deebo. All they have to do is save, I think, $7.5 million is what you need for your draft class.
And I think Deebo would be. I think Deebo would be willing to say 23. Yeah, I think that you can say 23 this year, and it just keeps going up over the next.
You can even maybe give him 20 this year, and then give him more next year, because that'll give you $10 million to play with for your draft class, plus maybe another position of need if you need it.
Right.
But the other thing is, Minnesota, despite being 8-9 last year, led in 15 of their 17 games last year.
They did.
The only two games they did not lead was against the Rams and against the Packers in Week 15 and 16. Otherwise, they had the lead in 15 of their 17 games.
Yeah,
they had the lead in 12. They had the lead in the fourth quarter in 12 of those games. They had the lead with 5 minutes left in the game 10 times and went 3-7 in those 10 games. Minnesota was not an 8-9 team last year. They were a team that should have won 12 or 13 games, but Mike Zimmer forgets how to coach in the final 5 minutes of the game and single-handedly cost that team at least 5 or 6 wins last year. So Deebo's looking at that saying he's got the relationship with Kwesi. He knows Kwesi. He knows what Kwesi likes to do. But going to Minnesota, you're going to a team that is kind of like Green Bay at the situation where they're in win-now mode. They have a new young head coach in Kevin O'Connell, who obviously Deebo knows him from the Rams, facing him twice a year. And you have a team that has all the pieces there where they can definitely improve a lot this year and do a lot of damage.
Yeah, them being an NFC team might hurt them, but also being in the NFC North might help them because San Francisco just likes to mess with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. That's what it feels like, right?
Well, and
this is your opportunity right here to basically say,
with Kwesi being from San Francisco, would San Francisco be willing to do him a solid and be like, hey, this is kind of our gift to you for becoming a GM? Take Deebo, rub it in the Packers' face, and then you help us out with the picks in the future.
And there you go. So it's interesting. Yeah, when Joe brought up Minnesota, it made a lot of sense. I never heard their name around it, but now to hear reports that they're kind of making moves behind the back and now jumping up the leaderboard, to me, I think Minnesota makes a lot of sense. Again, I still like New York, but if Minnesota happens, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Like you mentioned, San Francisco connection, check. Money, check. And if you need to trade Thielen because you're thinking to yourself, okay, we need to pay Justin Jefferson in a year the same type of money, okay, we can move off of Thielen as well, or we can just keep giving up picks. There's options here for Minnesota. There's options for San Francisco, and it might end up being a bidding war between Minnesota and New York, both of whom have San Francisco connections, so both of whom might be saying, look, can you just do me a solid? It's going to be an interesting thing. I was concerned San Francisco might not get much value, but now you throw Minnesota, you throw New York, I think both are going to be competing. I think Detroit and Green Bay are kind of out of the question the way I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, if you were to ask me in order of favorites to get him, I would go New York, Minnesota, Detroit, Green Bay for the sole reason that Green Bay, I don't think would be able to afford him. I think they have like 12 or 13 million left in cap space, so they would still have to figure out how to cut another 10 some million dollars now to get him there. But Green Bay is the last team that San Francisco is going to help.
100%. That's
last team that they're going to help. Detroit, I don't know how much money they have left over where they can spend. I don't think they have more than $20 million in cap space where you could bring him in. And you have the Jets and the Vikings. Both of them have that $20+ million in cap space. Both of them have the San Francisco connection with Saleh and Kwesi.
Mhm.
Jets have more draft ammo than the Vikings do, but I think the Vikings have more talent that they could part ways with, whether it's on defense or offense, to kind of help San Francisco out. And being that Saleh and Kwesi were both in that 49ers organization for years, I don't think the 49ers would hesitate to help either one of those teams out.
Yeah, again, I think that it's going to come down to I think one of those two teams. I think you hit it on the nail. My list would be exactly like yours. I'd have New York, Minnesota, and Detroit and Green Bay to follow. Well, Deebo is going to keep getting his name brought up. We're going to keep talking about it until next Thursday because that's when the trade will most likely be finished by then. But we have games going on tonight. Games happened last night. So much going on in the NBA. And we're going to recap the NBA playoffs as of what happened this week. Or do you want to start with tomorrow, Dustin? How do we want to start this one off? I think there's so much to break into. I think we can start off with what happened yesterday, and then we can just kind of jump into if we want to talk about any particular game.
Nope, that's fine.
All right. So yesterday, we had 3 games take foot. I don't think there was many surprises, or at least there was one surprise. I know from Dustin and I. Yeah, that was the one. We'll start with that, actually. Dallas took on the Utah Jazz. Dallas wins 126-118. I brought up to Dustin, I feel as if it could happen. I don't think it will, but if they win, I just take it away from here, Dustin. How if you're Utah, do you let Jalen Brunson and this Dallas team once again go to Utah this time and just take it from you?
I mean, are you ready to give Jalen Brunson some credit since you didn't think he could do what he did in Game 2 again?
I didn't know if he could do it consistently. I'm just going to be honest with you. I thought he's a good young player, but I don't know if he can do this again. Have 40 points and carry the team. He had 30 last night. It was unreal watching him play. He shot 50% from the field.
Yeah, I mean, Brunson, that to me was the X factor coming into the series. Him and Spencer Dinwiddie, just because they gave Dallas 2 other ball handlers, not named Luka Doncic, that can do similar things to what he can do, just not at the level that he can do it.
Right.
Then you have guys like Bullock and Finney who played 44 and 47 of the 48 minutes. 2 guys that literally stayed on the floor the entire game and didn't come off the floor. And then you have guys like Jeff Green off the bench and Maxi Kleber and Davis Bertans off the bench. All 3 of them had at least 12 points.
Yeah.
So Dallas was getting plenty of contributions top to bottom. And then you go over to Utah. Yes, you got 32 from Donovan Mitchell. Yes, you got 24 from Bogdanovich and 21 from Conley. But the bench was non-existent outside of Jordan Clarkson, and that's where the difference. That's where the difference in the game was. It came from that second unit where Dallas had 3 double-digit scorers, and the Jazz just had Jordan Clarkson with 14, and then you had Hassan Whiteside, House, and Pash combined for 10 points.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just it's not going to cut it. Again, I had Dallas win the series, to be honest with you, because I didn't trust Utah. But I thought Utah would at least win this game at home. Look, Dallas just took it to them. I mean, there's no other way to say it. They got anything they wanted offensively. And I'm trying to sit here and say, where was Rudy Gobert? His presence wasn't felt. Whether it was offensive rebounding, with the defense in the paint, there was nothing to be felt from him because, again, you talk about what the bench was able to do, what they're able to do without Luka Doncic. It's an indictment against really the Utah Jazz and what they are. They were minus 16 with Rudy Gobert on the floor. They were minus 16 with Mike Conley on the floor. Minus 13 with Robert O'Neal on the floor. With 3 of your 5 offensive starters, your plus minus was minus double digits. Minus double digits. Utah's just, it feels so mysterious to me how they aren't better than what they are because they feel like they have pieces. Hassan Whiteside feels like he should be a great guy coming off the bench, right, to complement Rudy Gobert. And you feel Jordan Clarkson can be the guy like Donovan Mitchell coming off the bench. You feel they have the pieces, yet somehow they find a way to lose these types of games that they should easily be winning.
Yeah, I think it's just more of – I think it's more Rudy Gobert, honestly. I
I'm
know
with you on that.
Pride and I talked about this on Prideful Takes on Monday, where Rudy Gobert has to be the most overrated player in the NBA.
I agree.
The only reason why people love him is because he's 7'3" and weighs 285 pounds, and you can't teach size. He has size.
Yeah.
He's going to give you 15 to 20 rebounds and 5 blocks every game because that's who he is, but he only had 7 rebounds last night. But for a guy that's 7'3", he has no offensive game at all.
There's no offensive game.
He has no face-up game. He's got no ball handling. He's got no jumper. The only thing he can do is stand down by the hoop and either put it in for a layup or get your follow-up dunks. That's all he can do.
You'd think he'd have a post move. There's no post move that he has.
And teams know that he was looked at as being that secondary option in Utah until they brought in Conley, and now Conley's that secondary option. But if you're 7'3" and you're supposed to be your secondary option, you need to at least give your team 20 points on a consistent night. And he barely gives you 13 points offensively. He's going to give you 15 to 20 rebounds, but getting 13 points offensively out of a 7'3" center, that's just inexcusable at this point. Which is why I think after this season, Utah moves on from him, and I think they just stick with Hassan Whiteside as their center.
You have to do something, and again, it's not like, to me, even defensively, I think he's a little bit overrated. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think he's that kind of, great defender. Is he solid? Sure, he's a solid defender, but I don't think he's this electrifying, game-changing defender. Like, I like Robert Williams in Boston better as a defensive center than I do Rudy Gobert. Again, I don't think Rudy Gobert has it beyond what is under the basket. I don't see it, and to me, he's got to find something. You think he'd develop a post move? You think he'd be able to at least guard out 18-footers? It feels like anything that's not on the block, he can't play defense against.
That's the thing. When he was playing in France or whenever he played in the FIBA World Cup, a 7'3" center in France is like a giant, where you don't need a post move. You stick your hand up in the air the whole game, and they'll lob it into you every single play because there's nobody else in France that's over 6'5", 6'6". So he never really had to develop that post move. And then he gets to the NBA, and it's just I really do need a post move. Well, it's too late for me to have one, so I'm just going to just work with what I got.
Yeah, and if I'm Donovan Mitchell, I'm saying, look, we got to make some changes here. Because Donovan Mitchell, to be honest, I don't know what more he could have done in this game. He scored 30 points. Defensively wasn't terrible. They were +4 with him on the court, and he was on the court a lot of the times with Rudy Gobert. So, to me, Donovan Mitchell has got to be frustrated with what Utah is right now, frustrated that they're losing to Dallas without Luka, and he's going to go to that front office if they lose the series and say, look, we're making changes. I don't care what you thought you had or what you want to have. We are making the changes, and it's going to happen right now because Dallas is up 2-1 in this series. Again, I had him winning this series before it started. Utah has Game 4 coming up, but again, this is a scary place to be without Luka. All right, if we jump to the Memphis Minnesota game.
No, let's do that game last.
That game last. All right, that's the meme game, so we'll save it. We'll do the Warriors Nuggets. Get this one out the way. This was the closest game of the night, which was to my surprise. But man, Jokic played his heart out. Unfortunately, he's the only person that could play, and Draymond had to just make one play and chose the right time to make one play.
Yep, this was the game that Jokic needed after kind of struggling in those first two games.
Yeah.
37 points, 18 rebounds, 5 assists. I mean, that's the Jokic that everyone saw during the regular season. You had Aaron Gordon give you 18 and 12, so you got solid production out of those two. And this was kind of that game that I think a lot of people thought Denver was going to get if they were going to get one of those games, and that was Game 3, coming back home, having the home crowd on your side, and this and that.
Right.
The problem is Jordan Poole scoring 27, Klay Thompson scoring 26, and Stephen Curry, who might not be coming off the bench the entire playoffs, and getting 27 points off the bench. And I know we said this on your podcast yesterday. If you have Stephen Curry coming off the bench, that's really all you need to know about the problems that you are going to give teams in the playoffs. Because we know what he does when he's in the starting lineup. Yeah. And now I'm not going to say you're putting him on a minutes restriction, but you're not putting the minute log on him right now. So instead of your 38, 39 minutes like he typically gets, he had 27 points in 30 minutes. So literally, he's getting you a point a minute. So you have two guys already in Thompson and Poole that have been just going off. Andrew Wiggins had a terrible night last night. He only had 9 points, but he's going to typically give you that 15 to 18 point range.
Yeah.
Now you have the greatest shooter in the history of the NBA that's like, well, I've been starting in the league for 12 years, but I'm good with coming off the bench right now. And guess what? I'm averaging 27 points a game coming off the bench right now. So, yeah, you can leave me here, and just good luck defending us for a 7-game series.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do when you have Jordan Poole of 27, Klay Thompson of 26, and Steph Curry of 20? There's 60 points just from 3 guys. Kevon Looney scored 0 points in 9 minutes. He's played 9 minutes and scored 0 points. I said, you know what? We like you, Kevon, but you're not playing. Just sit down. We're going to give all your minutes to Steph. And you started, right? To me, the starting lineup will eventually be Steph Curry at the 1, Jordan Poole at the 2, Klay at the 3. You'll see probably Wiggins at the 4, and then Draymond at the 5. I think that's going to end up being their starting lineup as you keep moving and progressing down this playoff series. But, man, this was the game Denver could have won. Again, Jokic had 37 points, 18 rebounds, and it's a shame because on every single possession last night, he beat Draymond. Anytime he had a chance to beat Draymond Green, he beat Draymond Green. Draymond Green could not defend him. But the one time we're going to look at Nikola Jokic is the one time he didn't beat him, right? And that's when it matters. That's when it matters. But to me, it's a shame because if Jamal Murray is playing, it's a whole nother series. And everyone's going to say, well, this is why Jokic isn't the best player in the league. This is why Jokic isn't the MVP. This is why Jokic is overrated.
No, he's the MVP.
He's the MVP. There's no doubt about it. If Jokic has even an ounce of help, just forget offensively, defensively, like what can he do when 3 guards have 60 points? What can he do in the paint with 3 guards have 60 points? Nothing. You can't do anything. So if you have Jamal Murray, it's a different ballgame. It's a different ballgame, and I feel for Nikola Jokic. I thought they were going to get swept, and it looks like they're going to. But you got to feel for Nikola Jokic after that.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out, and I want to give mad props to Steve Kerr right now, because name another coach that would. Obviously, he's not benching Curry because Curry was hurt.
Right.
But name another coach that would leave his star player on the bench.
Yeah.
When their star player is obviously showing that he's 100% healthy.
Yeah.
Kerr knows that the lineup right now is working with Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson as the starter. So you know that he probably went to Curry and said, hey, I know you like starting, but right now we are going to ride the hot hand with Jordan Poole and Thompson as a starter with you coming off the bench. And honestly, I don't think Curry cares. And you can tell Curry doesn't care. He's just out there. He cheers on his teammates, and then he comes in the game, does his thing. And I just want to give Kerr props on that because I don't think any other coach in the NBA would have Curry coming off the bench.
Yeah.
Regardless of how hot Jordan Poole is.
Yeah. I want to give Steph Curry that same kind of shout out because he's almost very Tim Duncan-ish, right? There's not a lot of superstars that are just willing to buy in to whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing that comes in with Tim Duncan that was like drama or anything. And that's the same thing with Stephen Curry. He's like, all right, I'm coming off the bench. Fine. I'll do whatever I need to do for the team. He leans into what the team's all about, the culture of the team. And it helps Steve Kerr. Like, I think if Kyrie was on the Warriors, there's no way in heck Kyrie's coming off the bench. You know, there's no way. There's no way that happens. James Harden, no way he's coming off the bench. But Curry's like, all right, you know what? That's fine. You do you, coach. I'm going to still be me, and we're going to get it done. I think that's, a big credit to what Curry is as a basketball player, because you talk about a lot of athletes. There's not a lot of athletes that would do that. Not a lot of basketball players. And it's very Tim Duncan-esque to be that kind of guy.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, the 3 scariest things in playoff basketball is a driving Giannis Antetokounmpo, LeBron James just going LeBron James, and then Stephen Curry heating up. And right now, Stephen Curry is heating up to the point where you can't stop him because when he gets going, you can't defend him because he'll just pop a 35-footer and make it look like a layup.
There's no question. There's no question. Damien puts in the comments, and I think this is in reference to what we said about Nikola Jokic. Luka doesn't need help, and he carried the Mavs, the playoffs, I think, to the playoffs. I think there's something to be said about to the playoffs versus in the playoffs. Luka's a great player. There's no doubt about it. Nikola Jokic right now is going against 3 guys who are scoring 27 points at a guard position. Nikola Jokic hasn't had a great series. But to be fair, there's been no help around him. And I get it. Luka, has he had a lot of help? No. But to the playoffs, you're playing Sacramento. You're not playing Golden State on a nightly basis. Jokic carried this team to the playoffs. So now Nikola Jokic, they are not a 5 seed. They are probably picking in the lottery. That's how bad this team was without Nikola Jokic. So when you say to the playoffs, that Jokic did it. Jokic did exactly that. So I don't know exactly if this, indicts Nikola Jokic. Well, we'll move on and we'll go into the game of last night because I think it was the funniest game of last night. The Memphis Grizzlies took on the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Minnesota Timberwolves were not the Atlanta Falcons once, but twice in their home stadium. And remember when Arthur Blank came down onto the field with his wife? That's when, to me, that moment was when Kat said, "We're in Minnesota now. It's a different game. We're in Minnesota now." And from that point, you didn't score a point until halftime. Then you got another 20-point lead. Minnesota ends the game on a 56 to, I believe, 16-point run.
Yeah, 56. Yeah, something like that for Memphis. Yeah,
Memphis
21 and nothing run too at one point.
Dustin, the Minnesota Timberwolves threw this one away.
It's like I said yesterday. I thought Minnesota was going to take Game 3 because of the being back at home for the playoffs for the first time in quite a while and having that home crowd on their side. And through 3 quarters, it looked like they were going to run away with that game, and everything was looking all fine and dandy. And then you let Memphis get it on a 21-0 run and just kind of do what they did. Chris Finch just got schooled in basically. I'm going to say Chris Finch pulled a Brandon Staley last night, where you are a first-year head coach, a first time in the playoffs, and you literally just found out firsthand why you need to make smarter decisions as a first-year head coach, because he got exposed badly in the fourth quarter last night. And I know a lot of people were saying that he should be fired for some of the moves that he made and this and that, which, okay, that's just a big overreaction because the guy's a first-year head coach, and there's not – I don't think you, myself, anybody on ASAP, and I can't remember anybody that covers NBA for a living really that even had Minnesota in the playoffs, let alone getting the 7 seed and winning their first play-in round. So the fact that he got them to be 46 and 36 is a credit to him as a coach. So he's showing that he's a very good young coach. But now it's the playoffs. You can't coach it like the regular season. I think he found out firsthand that you cannot coach your team the same way in the playoffs as you can during the regular season, and that's kind of why I think Taylor Jenkins and the Grizzlies took advantage of that, because this is Taylor Jenkins' first playoff appearance as a head coach, but he's been on the Memphis staff when they had Tim Jorger or whatever that guy's name was before him, when Memphis had those conference semifinals runs and conference finals runs for those couple of years, so he at least knows the difference of playoff basketball as opposed to regular season basketball. Right. You got to give the Grizzlies credit, though. I mean, they could have packed it in when they were down 26 and basically just said, it's not our night. We'll just take our lumps tonight and just kind of sit Jaren Jackson and all those guys in the fourth quarter just because they were getting their brains beat in. But they're like, nope, we're going to just start playing the way we can play. And they got on a 21-0 run, and the next thing you know, they're down by 5. And then the next thing you know, well, hey, we're going to win now. And now they're up 2-1 and are probably going to finish Minnesota off in the next 2 games, because this is one of those games that I think will have a lasting hangover effect on Minnesota the rest of the series.
Yeah. I mean, credit to Memphis for doing what they're doing. Desmond Bane flipped the switch. John Morant flipped the switch. They all flipped the switch when they needed to, and they got together and they said, "Look, we're not getting down." And I think a lot of it was in the first half. They basically made that comeback pretty much happen. So they said, all right, let's just do it again. We'll just do it again. For 4 minutes, we almost came back. Now we got a little bit more time to do so. One thing I want to talk about was how, if you're Minnesota, and I don't know if this is a coaching error, if this is a Karl Anthony Towns error, or if this is a Patrick Beverley error. How does Patrick Beverley, in the fourth quarter, have 5 shots, and Karl Anthony Towns, the third best center in the NBA, have 4? How does Karl Anthony Towns have less shots than Patrick Beverley in the fourth quarter when you need it most? Karl Anthony Towns had 8 points. He had 5 shots all game, 4 field goal attempts, and 1. How is that possible? Explain to me that. That is what blew my mind. If Karl Anthony Towns took 10 shots and missed 7 of them, fine. You know what? There's nothing much you could have done. But Karl-Anthony Towns took 5 shots total. Total. This is not Rudy Gobert. We know Cat can put up 60 points. How do you let that happen?
It's a coaching error. I mean, you look at the rest of the playoff field, you look at the rest of the teams that are left. In crunch time, every single one of those teams would go to their stars.
Right.
Bucks would go to Giannis. Bulls would go to DeRozan or LaVine. Miami would go to Butler. Embiid would be carrying the load for the Sixers. Boston would be going with Brown and Tatum. And yet you have Minnesota going away from Karl-Anthony Towns for whatever reason. That's just kind of those coaching errors as a first-year playoff head coach where it's like, well, I might have the best player on the floor tonight, but I'm just not going to go to him when it matters.
Well, Mike puts in the comments, ask Jimmy Butler that question. That's exactly what Jimmy has been saying about Cats at the Minnesota days. But I don't know if this is a question about being soft. I really don't. I just feel like they weren't trying to set up anything for Karl-Anthony Towns. It just felt like they said, Carl, just sit by the block and get the rebound. And if Anthony Edwards is doing that, fine. But it felt like Patrick Beverley was kind of waving him off at times. To me, like Dustin said, you go to your best player. If Boston is down in crunch time, do I want the ball in the hands of Jason Tatum or Jalen Brown? That's what I want the ball in the hands of. All right. I think if you're the Nets, you want it in KD or Kyrie's hands. Any team in the league knows my top 1, 2, or 3 players. If I have a big 3, great. If I have a big 2, great. If I have a big 1, whatever. It's got to be in their hands. And for Karl-Anthony Towns to only have 5 total shots in the entire game is unacceptable. And to me, 5 total shots it's never going to win you a game. I don't care where you're playing, who you're playing with. If you're the best player on the floor and you have 5 shots, you're not going to win. Period. And to me, that was the most mind-blowing thing. Not the fact that they blew 2 20-point leads. The fact that Karl-Anthony Towns did not get the ball when they needed him to get the ball.
And worst case scenario, you pound that ball to him.
Yeah.
Where if he draws a foul, he's an 80% free throw shooter.
It's not like he can't shoot. It
wouldn't have mattered. Like, hey, you might not be making the buckets on the paint, but you're getting to the free throw line. If you make 8 of 10 free throws, guess what? You're probably going to win that game down the stretch because they're going to have to follow you and keep following you to stop the clock.
Like, that's what KD did against Boston. They didn't win, but he said, crap, my shot ain't hitting, so I'm just going to get down there and draw a foul, and I'll hit my free throws towards the end of the stretch. Find ways to score. Get him the ball. And if Karl-Anthony Towns is not putting his hands up, then, yeah, Jimmy Butler is very much vindicated saying that he's soft. But to me, it felt like they weren't even trying to get him the rock. It wasn't that he was passing up shots. He didn't pull a Ben Simmons. They just weren't trying to get him the rock. And to me, if you don't try to get your best player the rock, you don't deserve to win. And that's exactly what happened. So we have 3 games going on tonight, though. The Heat taking on the Hawks. The Bucks taking on the Bulls, which I've got to get Dustin's take on. I think I know his take based off what color he's wearing and the outfit that he's wearing. And the Suns taking on the Pelicans. So we'll start with the Heat and the Hawks. Dustin, the Heat are sweeping, right? We're getting our brooms out?
I don't think they're sweeping. I think the Hawks get 1 game in Atlanta. I don't know if they get tonight or game 4. But playing a division rival in the playoffs is always hard to sweep. Just because you get them 4 times during the regular season, you know them better than anybody else in the playoff knows that team. So you know Atlanta's going to make some sort of adjustment at some point, or you're going to just have one of those games where the 3-point shot, which is one of Miami's specialties, is not falling, and then Trae Young just seems like he can't miss.
Right.
You are going to get one of those games at some point. I think Miami wins game 3, but I don't see them sweeping. I think Atlanta at least gets 1 game in this series.
Well, I got Miami tonight. I got Miami to get game 4 too. I'm picking the sweep. I know you're a gentleman, Dustin, but I don't always like being that gentleman. I'm only 18. Sometimes I don't got to be a gentleman. You know, that's how it works. But yeah, I can see your point. Sometimes a 3 just won't fall. And if Trae Young gets hot, it's like almost kind of Steph Curry-esque. You know, if he gets hot, there's really not much you can do. So, you know, I could definitely see one of those nights happening. We know Trae Young has that kind of capability. We're going to skip the second game, and we're going to go straight to the Suns-Pelicans. This is interesting, right? Because no Devin Booker, not available. The Pelicans basically took game 2, 1 Devin Booker left. I think if Devin Booker had stayed, they ain't winning that game. They headed back to New Orleans. Who do you have tonight?
This is going to be the turning point of the series. Now we know Devin Booker is going to miss multiple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know that if Phoenix gets through this first round, that they're going to be without Booker for part of the second round, and we don't know how healthy he's going to be after that because hamstring injuries are always tricky.
Yep.
So I'm not going to be surprised at all to see the Pelicans win, just
Mhm.
because now can Chris Paul carry a team on his own? We've
Right.
seen him do it in the past before, but not at 37 years old. So this is going to be a time where DeAndre Ayton's going to have to step up significantly to carry some of that slack.
Mm-hmm.
I do think Phoenix wins the game. I think they win the series, but it's going to be very interesting to see how things unfold after this, especially when we get into that second round where you could potentially have a Dallas Phoenix matchup where Booker and or Luka are not healthy. So who's got the better supporting cast there? But then I think we talked about it where if Booker's not 100% playing Golden State, I don't think it's going to matter at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting now because if Devin Booker is not playing, you don't have a chance. Like that's just going to be the case in terms of winning the NBA Finals because he's your offense. You know that. The trick is here. Game 7, if you're the Pelicans Suns, is scheduled for Saturday, April 30th. So I'm assuming that means round 2 would start after April 30th, right? So my initial thought was, is it the worst thing in the world to start losing some games because you like get to prolong the series and keep it running? But that's not going to play a factor in this whole thing. I think the Pelicans get tonight. I think the fact that they're going back to New Orleans, Devin Booker's out. You don't really know what DeAndre Ayton is going to be by himself. What CP3 is going to kind of be by himself. Can Cam Johnson and company be the 3-and-D guys they are when they have Devin Booker in the lineup? I don't know. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on them. I think the Pelicans are going to try to expose that pressure. And I also think Brandon Ingram is going to do his thing offensively. So I do think the Pelicans get tonight. I do think Phoenix still takes a series. But this is really interesting now because, again, Phoenix hasn't played without Booker in a long time. I don't think they have a lot of offense without Booker involved. To me, this is going to be a big ask on Monty Williams to say, hey, we know you didn't really win. You didn't win Coach of the Year, which is kind of crazy. But show us that you're the Coach of the Year based off the adjustments you pull off tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Coach of the Year thing, I mean, Phoenix, yes, they had a great year. They led the West basically start to finish. But you have to look at some of the teams that made the playoffs this year.
Oh, no, absolutely. I don't think – was he in the conversation? Was he a finalist?
I don't know. He wasn't one of the finalists.
I think that was kind of what was jarring, that Monty Williams didn't –
I think, yeah, I agree there. But, I mean, who are the – hold on. Do you even know who the finalists are?
I know. I just know that Monty
I'm going to look
Williams,
quick.
Coach of the Year final. But, again, I think this is going to be a big ask on them. Damian Hernandez said – do you give Zion some playing time, especially if you're trying to trade him? I don't think Zion wants to play. I think if he wanted to play, he'd be back already, to be honest. I think I saw the 360 dunk. Leg looked fine. Jumping looked fine. I mean, I think if he wanted to play, he'd already have played, Damian. Would I try to play him? I'd ask, but I don't think he's going to play. And honestly, I don't know if I want him to because you have your rotation set. Your chemistry's kind of set. I'm just not sure how that whole thing is going to end up working. So, to me, I don't think I would go and play Zion. Again, I don't think Zion's trying to play either.
So, yeah, I mean, Monty Williams is in the Coach of the Year finalist.
Oh, he's in the finalists. Okay.
So, your finalists are Monty Williams, Taylor Jenkins of Memphis, Ime Udoka, Chris Finch of Minnesota, and J.B. Bickerstaff of Cleveland.
They have more than 3 finalists? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they have 5, and then it gets narrowed down to 3 after the first round.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, I mean, Taylor Jenkins, obviously he should be there for what he did with Memphis.
Right.
Udoka, obviously he should be there for what he did with Boston.
Come on.
And then, honestly, I think Bickerstaff or Finch should be the other one just because both of them took a Cleveland and Minnesota team that no one expected much of and at least had them in playoff contention.
That's true. No, yeah, the Coach of the Year conversation is interesting. And, yeah, when you talk about Cleveland, no one expected Cleveland to be this good. No one expected Minnesota to be the way they are. Boston had a huge turnaround and are playing some of the best basketball right now. So, yeah, I could see him not being in the conversation. I think, though, if he's able to come out and put up a lot of good adjustments and they come out with a win or 2 wins, you're talking about a guy who's going to be high on confidence. He's going to show to everybody, look, I might not win it, but I should have. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of something that he's going to throw out there. Oh, Damian. We're going to have some problems. You keep throwing stuff like this out there, all right? I'm just going to throw that out there. But so those are the Friday matchups. Did I ask you who's going to use? Yes, I did ask you who's going to win. I had a brain fart for a second.
We did
Damien
not
kinda
talk.
threw me
We
off
did
the
not
game.
talk about the Bulls and Bucks yet. For
Yeah, I know. That's what we're getting to. I hope Mike's still here because we got the Bucks taking on the Bulls. This series should be 2-0 in favor of the Bulls. If they were able to hit 1% more of their shots in game one, you're talking about a whole another ball game. They're heading back to Chicago. Chris Middleton is done, at least for a couple of weeks.
More than a couple.
Dustin, why are the Bulls going to win game 3?
This is a must-win game for Milwaukee more so than a Bulls, just because Middleton is always seen as that secondary scoring option for Giannis because he's a good three-point shooter. He can stretch the floor, and when he stretches the floor, it opens things up in the lane for Giannis. And through 2 games in this series, Middleton has scored 27 combined points. He had 9 points in game 1 and 18 points in game 2. So he's only averaging 13.5 points in the playoffs right now after averaging close to 20 during the regular season. The Bucks' secondary scorer right now is Brook Lopez, who, give him his credit, he played very well in the playoffs last year too, so it doesn't surprise me. But at some point, you're going to need more out of Drew Holiday. You're going to need more out of Middleton, Wesley Matthews, Grayson Allen, just because the Bulls may lack the size that the Bucks have with Lopez and Giannis.
Yep.
But they have, I think, more skilled guards on the outside to make up for it.
Right.
And we've seen it. Take away the Milwaukee Bucks first quarter in game 1 when they got out to that 22-5 lead. Chicago outplayed Milwaukee the rest of that game. They outscored Milwaukee by 9 points the final 3 quarters of that game.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that the Bulls had that 18-point lead midway through the third quarter in game 2, and then the Bucks pretty much outscored them after that. They outscored them by 14 points after that, but the Bulls did what they needed to do. When the Bulls had that 18-point lead, they never let it go. They let Milwaukee get close, and then Chicago would stretch it back out to 12, and then Milwaukee would battle back. But if you look at game 1, not only did Milwaukee let that 16-point lead get away, they let the Bulls take the lead. The Bulls actually had that 5-point lead in the third quarter. The Bulls actually had the lead late in the fourth quarter, and Milwaukee was confused. Milwaukee didn't know what was happening. They're like, how did this even get to the point where we're at right now? And then the biggest thing was Alex Caruso. This is the Caruso effect that the Lakers missed this year. Yeah. This is the Caruso effect that everyone basically said this is the reason why the Bulls brought him in, because he's that veteran presence that has that playoff experience. But these are the things that never show up in the box score.
Nope. His
tenacity on defense, the way he doesn't fear anybody on the court, getting under player skin, and just doing all these little things that never show up in the box score. When he plays the way he's played these first 2 games, you can just see it trickle down to the rest of the team. Nikola Vusovich was ranked the second worst center defensively this year. And a lot of people don't even like him on the floor in the fourth quarter on defense because he's a defensive liability, but you have to keep him out there because he's your only legitimate scoring big man.
Right.
To be honest, Vucevic hasn't played that bad a defense in the playoffs so far.
No, he's looked pretty good.
He hasn't played great defense, obviously, but compared to the way he looked in the regular season, his defense has been good. And that's because Alex Caruso is doing a lot of things that other players on this team can't, which makes everybody else's defensive responsibility so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee came into the series winners of 18 of 19 against Chicago. Winners of 12 straight against Chicago. They haven't lost a game to Chicago in 3 years. Everyone said this was going to be a cakewalk for the Bucks, where they were going to come in, sweep Chicago, and basically just keep doing what they've done the last 5 years. And the Bulls have not only shown that this is not going to be a cakewalk series and that Milwaukee is going to have to earn the 7-game series victory if they want to advance, but the Bulls are showing that they should be up 2-0. They're starting to look like that team that was 38-20 at one point that was leading the Eastern Conference, and it all falls on DeMar DeRozan, who dropped 41 points on 62% shooting. There was a time during the regular season, obviously the opposition wasn't the best during the stretch, but he had a 9-game stretch during the regular season where he averaged 35 points a game on 50% shooting, which is an NBA record. Yep. So we know what DeRozan can do when he gets going, and with the way his mid-range was, we know what he can do. If you get 30 points out of him, and you get 20 points out of Levine, and you get 20 points out of Vucevic, Chicago's going to be tough to beat. I don't care what anyone says. I don't think they fear Milwaukee at this point just because they play them so much. I don't think they fear anybody at this point. They just know that it took a terrible shooting game in game one to keep them from being up 2-0 right now. And I think everybody inside that organization knows that those three players are not going to shoot that poorly again. You might have a game where Zach LaVine shoots that bad or a game where Vucevic shoots that bad, but all three of them collectively will not shoot that poorly again. So you have to like Chicago's chances to not only win again tonight, but to make things very interesting in the Eastern Conference if they can take out the defending champs.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have the Bulls to win tonight. And again, I just think what Alex Caruso brings to me is kind of what Marcus Smart brings in Boston. It's that tenacity on defense that's not going to show up a lot of the times. And he makes everyone's life easier, whether he's guarding the 1 or he's guarding Giannis, who will play the 4 or the 5 at times. So it's going to be tough for Milwaukee because I don't know who's your perennial second scoring option. Who's that consistent option that you have? Brook Lopez is nice, but he's not a second option. And also, that clogs things up now for Giannis Antetokounmpo. It clogs things up when he's in the game and you don't have that stretch guy in Chris Middleton. So, to me, I think they lost a lot of spacing with Chris going down. I think they lost a lot of scoring. And with the Bulls' defense, they're going to need someone beside Giannis to step up. I don't know who that's going to be. The Bulls, Vucevic is shooting great. DeMar DeRozan is playing good ball. Alex Caruso's who Grayson Allen wishes he could be. That's what Grayson Allen wants to be and just can never be that. To be quite honest, he wants to be the tenacious guard who's not afraid of anybody, and he fails at that role. Alex Caruso is what Grayson Allen wants to be, really the way I look at it. So I got the Bulls winning this game. I think the Bulls are going to end up winning the series, especially with Chris Middleton down. I think if Chris Middleton didn't go down, this would be a 7-game series, and I think I still might take Chicago. But without Chris Middleton, I don't think the Bucks really stand a chance.
Well, I think the Bucks stand a chance because of Giannis, but the one thing that Chicago has done that not many teams are willing to do, they're letting Giannis beat them. Like a lot of teams try to take Giannis out,
right,
and then try to win that way. Chicago knows at this point without Middleton, it's Giannis and nothing right now where they'll let Giannis get 35, 40 points a game, and they don't care.
Yeah,
they will just take the other four. They will just take the other 4 players out and force Giannis to do it on his own, and he's not going to be able to.
Yeah, you're not. No one can do it on their own. There's never been a player, I don't care if it's Michael Jordan or LeBron James, that can do anything on their own in the National Basketball Association. Well, Dustin, that is about time for us. The Bulls, good luck today. I know you're headed to Game 4 when that does come out, so that's exciting times for you. We appreciate you guys for tuning in and checking out this episode of ASAP Recap. Dustin, I know you are sporadically on the morning show, so if you ever want to catch Dustin, that's where you can catch him. I know you also have some stuff coming out on Monday. Why don't you go plug yourself for a little bit, man?
Yeah, I'll be back. Mondays will typically be my days that I'm on ASAP in the morning just because I do not work Saturdays and Sundays, so I don't have to sleep till 2 in the afternoon. So those will be the days that I'll be on ASAP in the morning, but I'm bringing my Chicago sports podcast back on Monday. And Monday I will have the Iowa Cubs manager and PA announcer on that podcast on Monday. We'll have South Bend and Myrtle Beach on later next week. And then the following week we'll have Tennessee's manager on as well. Hoping to get Bears stuff on there. I'm hoping to get in contact with Stacey King from the Bulls and try to get some of them on there. But since baseball is kind of underway right now, I'm going to start the podcast kind of back off of the baseball side of things and work our way there. So if you have a chance to listen to that, check that out. Otherwise, like Aaman said, ASAP in the morning when I'm on. Otherwise, just Fridays with Aaman. That's pretty much what the ASAP schedule looks like right now.
Well, it's always a blast to have you on. Again, make sure you check out all the Dustin stuff over there. If you want to check out any of my stuff, just type this little sucker, Aaman Patel Sports News, anywhere you find your podcast. They will all be there. We appreciate you guys for being on. We know that that there's going to be some great games and there's going to be some great stuff for us to talk about next Friday. I hope you guys come back with us next Friday here on ASAP Recap at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, around 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we finish. Thank you guys so much for putting stuff in the chat and checking out our entire show. And until next time, stay safe, y'all.
Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making a plays. We talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.